So what I wanted to say is that, first of all, I want to remind everyone to speak slowly. And I wanted to ask the interpreters if we are speaking, if we are speaking too fast, maybe you can have your cameras on so you can do just like this, and we know that is to slow down, if you are fine with it. I also wanted to just say that we have Shize and Onur doing tech support. Thank you. We have Sinan is going to interpret from Portuguese to English. So he's going to interpret what Pablo is saying. And Matilde and Noah are going to switch to interpret from Portuguese to, from English to Portuguese. So they will interpret what we are saying for Pablo to understand. Yeah, I also wanted to say that this is going to be recorded, as you know. We are going to publish some shorts of the webinar afterwards, but if you want to see them before we publish them, the shorts that we selected, please let me know. So let me know so we can, thank you, Anur. Let me know so, yeah, so I can send it to you, if you want to see it before it's published. Just send me an email or text after the webinar. This is for the speakers. And yeah, just wanted to review the agenda of the webinar. So we will start, I will start by giving the briefing of interpretation to the people that are attending the webinar. And then I'm going to introduce the webinar and introduce the speakers. I also wanted to let you know that Brittany, who was going to talk about the surge, sorry, I didn't say this before, but yeah, I didn't have time. Brittany is not attending the webinar anymore for reasons that, since people are already joining, I will explain at the beginning of the webinar. And yeah, and I think that people are already starting, so I don't know if it makes sense for me already joining. So I don't know if it makes sense for me to continue doing this briefing. Oh, I wasn't seeing Matilde. All right, so I will continue, but please, Onur and Shize, don't admit people on the webinar until we officially start. I will be done in a couple of seconds. So yeah, I will introduce Grand Strategies, basically the main content on the book about it, and then I will pass on the word to the speakers to do the first question. To the three of you, each one of you will have around 7 minutes to answer. Then I will do a second round of questions. So these are the questions that we have prepared for, we have talked about before on this, and then you'll also have 7 minutes to answer each. And at the end, I will just open for general questions to you, or also feedback from the public on the questions I did to you. And it will be more like, yeah, freestyle, and for the rest of the time that we have. Are there any questions for the speakers, interpreters, tech support? Is everyone
when should I switch the pages, the slides?
When I say Onur.
Yes.
Yeah, I will say Onur, and then you say.
Pode colocar as questões escritas no chat?
Sina, you need to interpret.
Pode colocar as questões por escrito no chat, assim forem previamente.
I couldn't hear. Pablo, can you repeat? And Sinan, can you interpret? Pablo, can you repeat the question?
É possível colocar as questões por escrito no chat? As questões que vamos ter 7 minutos para responder.
I can send it to you on WhatsApp again. All right, you can start admitting people in, and we can start in 5 minutes, I guess. Well, let's just see. Are we okay? Can I see a show of hands? An enthusiastic show of hands? Okay, cool. And hi to the people that joined meanwhile. Sorry, we were just preparing the last things because technical stuff with interpretation, slides, recording is not that intuitive for everyone. And we'll just wait a few more minutes to see if more people will join us. And thank you all for being here with us today. All right. So for the people that joined, I need to give some information about interpretation, right? And should I, Onur, should I be doing this on the main channel or on the English channel? So to make sure that everyone hears.
The main channel, actually.
Okay. So please, to the interpreters that are on all channels, just give the information about just say that if people are on a specific channel and want to listen to another language, they need to change the channel where they are. All right, hi everyone. Hope that you can hear me. So we have interpretation on this webinar, and if you want to be able to listen to everyone that is going to speak, you need to be on the channel of interpretation of the language that you want to listen to. So on the bottom of your screen, you have the icon of a globe and it says interpretation, and you need to press there. And if you want to listen to English, you need to say that you want to listen to English. And if you want to listen to Portuguese, you need to say that you want to listen to Portuguese. Agora, em português, caso haja pessoas aqui que estejam a ouvir em português, o webinar vai ter interpretação, e para vocês ouvirem sempre em português, vocês precisam de ir ao sinal do globo que está na parte de baixo do vosso ecrã, carregar a interpretação e mudar para o canal em português para garantir que vão sempre conseguir ouvir os intérpretes. Did you pass on the info in the English and Portuguese channels? All right. So hope everyone is in the right channels. And I'll just wait 2 more minutes and then let's get this going. All right. So, Sinan, I don't know if you were able to see Bertie's message about the CryptPad form link for people to join the webinar, but I'm guessing that, yeah, people that might have registered received the registration link to the Zoom somehow. But yeah, just letting you know. It's very weird not to see your faces, but okay. So, hi everyone. Let's start this webinar, which will also be available for recording for people to see later. More people that aren't here will also be able to hear all the amazing things that you all have to say. So yeah, the first thing I wanted to say to everyone that is here is that this webinar is being recorded. So if you have any problem with if you have any problem with showing your face or someone or something like that, you don't need to turn your camera on. Otherwise, it's always nice to see people's faces. Even though we are online, it's more warm. So I also invite everyone to turn on their cameras if they feel comfortable to do this. So without further ado, this webinar is about the all-in book fourth proposition, which is choose your grant strategy. And I will do a reminder of what this means in a bit for those of you that read the book a while ago. But I wanted to say that if you haven't seen the other webinars that we have done so far, which were 3 other webinars, then I also invite you to go to our YouTube channel and watch the recordings of the other webinars. My name is Alice, and I'm a climate justice activist from Portugal. I'm currently with Climáximo and helping with spreading the word about this book that provides a revolutionary theory to stop climate collapse. And I will be moderating this webinar today. And with us, we have Louise. Hi, Louise. So Louise cut his teeth working on illegal dumping and public safety issues with the land defenders of a small indigenous community. He has extensive experience in environmental advocacy as well as activist education projects. Today, he is interested in flooding and working with communities impacted by floods in the UK, and he will be talking more on that experience. As you know, we had also announced to have Brittany from the Search platform on this webinar, telling us the scenario in which the Search was investing. However, the Surge had an international congress this weekend. I was also there in Brussels, and some change in direction was proposed on this congress. I wasn't expecting such a turn, and also other people were also caught by surprise. And now the surge is going to be exploring and reorienting its direction, and it's not clear what are the next steps and what is the direction that the surge will take. And taking this into account, it would be counterproductive to present what is going to be the direction of the surge and what is the grand strategy of the surge, because the people on the platform are also now reflecting on what they think it makes more sense right now. And it will also not be the purpose of this webinar to be talking about this internal process. So for now, I talked with Brittany and other people from the Surge platform to withhold this presentation for today, but I'm still in touch with them about how can we explore the experiences of the Surge and the learnings also from this week's Congress on next steps, next webinars, maybe some articles, but I won't go into that today. And yeah, this is also, this is a pity that we weren't able to have Brittany today with us and to have the capacity to make this adjustment, but without such a short notice, I wasn't able to rethink the format of this webinar. And it's difficult to organize a webinar with such a level of volatility, but we should still appreciate the speakers that we have with us today. And besides Louise, today we also have Bertie Coyle, which is a supporter of Just Stop Oil in London, and he's involved in the campaign since 2022. He has experience in the communicational work of Just Stop Oil, and using organic media coverage, Just Stop Oil has succeeded in bringing fossil fuel policies to the center of the public debate. And he will also talk with us today about what were the grand strategy and scenarios that Just Stop Oil was investing in, and maybe give us some thoughts about what's going on right now. Then with us, last but not least, we have Pablo Neri, which is going to be speaking in Portuguese and being translated. He is from MST, Movimento de Trabalhadores Rurais Sem Terra, movement of rural workers without land, and he's from the state of Pará in the Brazilian Amazon. He is currently a member of the MST's National Directorate. He has a degree in history and a specialization in economics and agrarian development. Without further ado, and welcome everyone who joined meanwhile. Sorry, I will try to speak slower. And to everyone that joined meanwhile, hope you are on the right interpretation channel. If maybe Onur, you could send a message on the chat just to tell people how they can be in the right interpretation channel. If they aren't, that would be great. If I'm really speaking too fast and not looking to the messages or to the interpreters, please you can interrupt me. You can, in some kind of way, people that know that I'm speaking too fast can tell me to slow down. And I use this opportunity also to thank Noah, Mathilde, and Sinan for interpreting on this webinar. And also to Onur and to Shize for the amazing tech support. So I will start by refreshing our memories about what grand strategies mean. And then I will pass on the words to our amazing speakers for them to share their different grand strategies and thoughts about what our movement should be better prepared for. And I'll then open the debate for all of you to do questions or to share your own reflections. And if you have questions for the speakers while they are speaking, please note them down, because we'll have time at the end to listen to everyone. And we want this also to be, interactive for the end, but first we want to listen to everyone. So last webinar, for those of you that were there, we talked about models of transformation. And we propose that we focus only on building the ruptural movement. This webinar, we will see that even if we only look at the ruptural movement, our movement still looks divided. And this is because we are betting on different scenarios. And now I'll ask Onur to change the slides. Dun, 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 dun. Slide change, Onur, please. Well, while Onur is trying to change the slides, I will just carry on. So I don't want to extend myself too long, but I will just review some of the concepts that are written on All-in. So based on the variables of both participation and organization that defines the power of the movement, in All-in there are three different scenarios. There are three different grand strategies that are identified. The first one that All-in identifies is spontaneous uprising. And spontaneous uprising has at its core example the French Revolution of 1789. And on the spontaneous uprising grand strategy, the movement finds a burning issue that the public will act on and mobilizes masses against the establishment. And this is more focused on participation and less focused on organization. The other grand strategy identified is the mass agitation, which can be exemplified by the Bolshevik Revolution. This aims at building popular support through agitation on some topics and radicalization through the vanguard. And this is a mix of participation and organization. Aha, thank you. While the revolution is done by the masses, there is a solid organization guiding the masses and increasing their effectiveness. And the last grand strategy is the ideological mobilization, which recruits peoples first, then educates them, and it's the movement and not the population that confronts the establishment. Examples of these are guerrilla movements or the Chinese Communist Revolution, and this strategy emphasizes organization over participation. All of these grand strategies have different kind of drawbacks. So the spontaneous uprising can have as a drawback creating cynicism for the public because they are a lot of times not successful. When they are successful, they can also lead to a power vacuum if no one was prepared to hold on to the power. Mass agitation can have as a drawback when the intermediate element, the vanguard, is self-proclaimed, leading to vanguardism or substitutionism. And ideological mobilization can have the risk of isolation or sectarianism. So this is just, we are not going to be focusing so much on these fixed categories. We are going to look more for the scenarios, but we'll also find that in each scenario we can also see kind of pitfalls that we can recur to. So these different grand strategies that I just said are splitting the movement, and we need to be able to live with this split, because this happens because we are looking at different scenarios and we are looking at different places and opportunities and preparing for this. And now you can pass on the slide, Onur. Thank you. So I'm going to refer to what kind of scenarios and refresh our memories about what kind of scenarios the movement can be preparing for. So Onur, whenever you want, you can move on the slides, but I will carry on. So one of the scenarios that we can be looking at, thank you, is abrupt social and economic changes. Examples of this can be the financial crisis of 2008. So these are situations that break the existing consensus within the status quo, and this creates opportunities of action. Another scenario that the movement can be looking at in order to gain power can be outrageous moments. And a good example of this is the George Floyd's murder. Usually these events are triggered by the ruling class, but not necessarily. They can also be triggered by the movement. And one example of such an outrageous moment created by the movement was Rosa Parks, when Rosa Parks sat in a bus in a place where she supposedly was not supposed to sit according to the existing law. And these can be windows of opportunities that through the outrage of the people create true revolts if they are used properly. Another scenario we can be looking at is the failure of the legitimacy of the regime. One example of this is the Argentina's debt crisis in 2001. And this can be created, this failure of legitimacy can be created by successive outrageous moments. This failure of legitimacy is strengthened by mass agitation, and it's relatively an artificial scenario that is also creating by the movement questioning the legitimacy of the regime. Another scenario can be an unstable regime, and this we are referring to conflicts within the status quo. So, for instance, if the status quo is, if the state is suffering an invasion or an economic sanction or something like that, that disrupts the normal functioning of the regime, can also be an opportunity for action. Another opportunity can be natural disasters. They can also be used as outrageous moments. Then for the sixth scenario, we can also look at the cultural hegemony. And this is the main guarantee of the stability of the system. And it's maintained through the media, it's maintained through the education system, and so on. And we might aim to undermine it, to attack it, or to create alternatives to it that change what is seen by the people as possible, as expected, and as tolerated. And last but not least, these scenarios need to be accompanied by a revolutionary program for the moment that the rupture happens and for what happens after the rupture with the system. And this revolutionary program is supposed to radicalize the movement as a whole, to lead them towards victory. And you can pass on to the next slide, Onur. And I gave all of these, kind of refreshing of what is written on the book, just for those of you that have already read all in, to situate yourselves of where we are. But what I wanted to say is that a lot of the times movements aren't thinking actively about on which grand strategy they are investing on. They are, however, looking at which scenarios they think are most likely to happen, and then choose a grand strategy, choose a strategy that responds to those scenarios. And this is more what we are going to be looking at today, because the reality is that the movement needs to be looking at all of these different scenarios, because all of these different scenarios can be the opportunity that we need for the rupture that we need within climate deadlines. So today we are going to look at different examples of different scenarios of where the movement is already looking at. And because of this, we have today Just Stop Oil, MST, and Louise working on people impacted by floods and flooding, and to understand what are the opportunities and challenges of looking at these kind of scenarios that you already have here, and also to reflect on which scenarios maybe the movement that we need is not preparing for and should be. And I wish we could see the next slide, but I will not, yeah, so this was just, this was just what kind of grand strategy corresponds to to each of the scenarios that we can be preparing for. But maybe we can now turn off the presentation, because now I'm going to pass on to people that are way more interesting than me speaking, to our amazing speakers. And what I wanted to ask to each of you, and it's the same question, but you are all going to have different and amazing answers. So what I wanted to ask to you is, to which scenarios you are preparing for, from the scenarios that I talked to, but thinking in concrete terms, what are you preparing for? How are you doing this? What is your goal? And if you have time on your 7 minutes intervention, you can also share some of the challenges and opportunities that you are facing pursuing this kind of strategy. And I will start by Luis. Tell us about floods.
Okay. Hi, thanks for having me. I'll try and speak slowly, but if I fail to do that, just kind of wave me down. And yeah, I mean, to your points, I would say that flooded communities in the UK do not even know what for the most part, don't know what a grand strategy is. Nor are they necessarily very interested in destroying capitalism, right? And so this is actually something that you see in interesting ways across other struggles, such as housing rights. There's very, very interesting work being done by ex-London Renters Union organizers on the presupposition that the people on the rough end of the housing crisis would be most interested in abolishing in radical solutions to it. And that just doesn't turn out to be true. So the same goes with flooding, which is that the people who flood want to not flood and get along with their lives. And that doesn't mean that they won't change their minds. They're just the same as everyone else. And a lot of the work that you want to do if you work with these communities is to try to stimulate, facilitate, and support a process whereby the larger context that's made these floods happen gets thought about, and whereas people start getting an interest in their own stake in these bigger issues. But usually in the first shock, it's just reality is here, my house, and I want it to stop. And so when myself and colleagues and friends and comrades, whatever you want to call it, look at flooding, we don't necessarily, I think it's a lot like what you said, Alice, which is like, we don't necessarily start with Eric Olin Wright, but we do think very, very carefully about the politics of disasters, the timelines of disasters. And when it comes to UK flooding, we know from experience, we know from academic research that the flood happens, it's all over the media, and that can often be a stimulus for social change. And if you map the history of flood policy in the UK, major events such as the 1953 deadly floods or the 2007 mega summer floods have tended to act before major changes in policy. And so within this, there's an opportunity for the communities who flood on their own terms to try to achieve non-incremental policy shifts. And so that's definitely something that the organizations advocating for flooded people on that more strategic end of the line, we think about what needs to be in place when the very, very, very serious flood that we fear is going to happens, to ensure that the resulting political energy does not get wasted and that it goes towards the kinds of things that flooded communities care about, and ideally, if you are an environmental person, that environmentalists care about as well. And so in terms of the details of that, typically you need to have ideas that have a widespread buy-in to create this kind of gap of, like it's a blunt instrument, the outrage of an unacceptable scenario in an environmental disaster. It's problem, solution. And so there needs to be a bit of narrative work, if, to use NGO terms, or there needs to be within the right range of stakeholders, the kinds of people that are going to be interviewed by journalists and be, featured in evidence submissions. there needs to be ideas and trafficking about what's going wrong, why, and the likes. And so outside of the crisis moment, what you can do as a community organizer is to try to shape that zeitgeist in a way to try and rush it through after the fact. So that's loosely the way that, and I can get into details that we're thinking about flooding. And in the UK, flooding in the UK is not the same as flooding in other places. There are cultural and material realities that adapt. But one of the things that happens in the UK is that we get lots and lots of dry runs because it floods every winter somewhere. And so you can practice these routines every winter, every summer when these floods do happen to test out, iterate against. That's our plan. I'm not sure where I'm at in my 7 minutes, but the last thing that I can say is that if you're coming at this from an environmental standpoint and environmental concerns, which lots of us are, then I think that it's fair to say that the environmental or certain people taking on environmental tasks, beliefs and attitudes towards the disasters have been very naive and complacent to this point. And we've seen that with events like Valencia and Los Angeles, where the front lines are not the traditional places where we expected them to be. And people actually getting media stories out of saying, wow, this hasn't automatically turned everyone into a climate activist. Anyone who knew anything about disasters before that would have told you that after a kind of undergraduate class in disaster management. And so the last thing I'll say to conclude is that if you are coming at this from an environmental standpoint, it's vital to understand that disaster management predates climate. You can have disasters outside of climate change. And there are lots and lots of people out there who think about disasters, have studied disasters and what to do about them. And if you want to make these part of a political program, a good start to actually, read up on the intra debates within the people who care about that.
Thank you, Luis. And we'll listen to questions about what you just said in a few minutes. But I think that I will first pass to Bertie, because we just talked about a bit of the reality in the UK. And I would be interested to hear, since you also are from the UK, why are you not looking at floods? What are you looking for? What are you doing in Just Stop Oil? And what were you, what were the scenarios you are trying to prepare for? How?
Yeah, sure thing. I'd love to. Thanks very much to Louis. That was extremely interesting and really enlightening. Louis got the flood plans locked down. So I wouldn't ever dare tread on his toes. I'm going to speak about Just Stop Oil, which is an organization that's been active from 2022 until now. It's important to note that recently, Just Stop Oil has announced that it's hanging up the high vis, by which we mean we're stopping our actions. So the campaign is ending, in a sense, ready to make way for a new one. This comes after the UK government has announced that it is banning new oil and gas drilling and extraction licenses, which was the Just Stop Oil demand. So after the demand has been met, Just Stop Oil, in the sense it's existed, is coming to a close. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened in that time and where we were working. So JSO, which I'll call it from now on, came about at the tail end of a long conservative government, which was in power for about 14 years. It went through lots of different flavors, from Boris Johnson to Liz Truss to Rishi Sunak. We outlasted 3 prime ministers, and we've got Keir Starmer as number 4. As I said before, we campaigned to end new oil and gas extraction licenses in the UK. This was a common sense demand. It was basically a very well chosen crack in which to place a chisel and start hammering. There's enormous contradiction between people, by which I mean the UK public. I'm sure it's true all over the world, but I've only ever lived in England. by people being told to worry about the climate crisis, being lectured on quite trifling matters about the environment. In the United Kingdom, people spent years and still do talking about straws as the main topic about the environment. People are very tired of this, seeing this happen, while also seeing the problem getting worse, while the rich in our society get richer. This fundamentally irritates everybody. It's something everyone's aware of on some level. Almost all notable climate policies in the UK, if they do happen, they're balanced off the paychecks of working people. Rich never ever foot the bill. So running cover for this requires a lot of work from the British press, which is a very, very corrupt industry. We're a nation that's fundamentally controlled by the press in the United Kingdom. There's a street in London where historically newspapers had their offices, and it's called Fleet Street. And since that time, the newspaper industry in Britain is just called Fleet Street. And if the devil works hard, then Fleet Street works a lot harder. So the UK media, they run cover for the elites by ignoring climate collapse, failing to indicate who's responsible for it, the richest in our society and corporations, and by failing to hold politicians accountable for it. This is the job of the UK media. And politicians in the UK, they answer to these corporations and they answer to Fleet Street, that's the media. They answer to that much before they answer to the public. And for this reason, it's cultural hegemony, which is the pillar where Just Stop Oil had the most success. At this point, I would like to notice I am just one small fish in a big organization. Just Stop Oil is a campaign that involved thousands of people over the course of many, many years. What I'm saying now is the perspective of a limited perspective for one person. This is not the definitive strategic download in Just Stop Oil. I just wanted to caveat that. But in my view, one of the most notable pillars that Just Stop Oil operated on was cultural hegemony. We succeeded, in my view, by manipulating the media. By gaming the attention economy and making use of eye-catching tactics, Just Stop Oil forced politicians to be held accountable for climate action. Because the Conservative government was in a sort of period of decline, other parties were able to take advantage of all the scrutiny about oil and gas licenses. So oil and gas licenses, which were previously a very important but not spoken about issue, they were on the back business pages of the newspaper. They weren't the news. They suddenly became the central topic of climate action. So other politicians grabbed that and they adopted the demands of new oil and gas. And so when the Labour Party came into power and the Conservative Party came out, Labour put into action our core demand of no new oil and gas licenses. One of the main challenges we face from this is the repression. We've had hundreds of people put into prison, thousands of arrests, like untold pounds and pence in injunctions, costs, fines. This is ramped up steadily to the point where people who've been sentenced recently, they're facing 8 years in prison for allegedly helping to plan nonviolent actions. This is a logistical and emotional challenge. But at the same time, it's a crucial way of putting pressure on the illegitimacy of the regime, which is another of the scenarios that was spoken about earlier. By clamping down on peaceful protest, but on such a life and death issue like the climate collapse, the regime is shown to be weak. They're resorting to extraordinary force to silence dissent. In this way, Court cases and prison sentences, they were tools of resistance, and they are. They're not simply consequences, but ways in which the status quo is eroded. By relentlessly speaking the truth, a very confrontational truth that calls the climate crisis a genocide, and having a constant presence on the streets, Justapol we didn't create a mass uprising by 2025, but we did sow the seeds of what is to come next. I think I'll end it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marty. And I'm so glad to have you here to, well, maybe get some thoughts on what will come next. But we'll get to there in a bit. And now I wanted to move to a different continent and to give on the word to Pablo to hear about the amazing work that MST has been doing, and fundamentally to ask why has MST been doing the kind of work that has been doing for such a long time. What are the scenarios that you are preparing for? What are you trying to achieve? How is that going?
Boa tarde a todos, boa tarde desde aqui do Brasil, do Pará, da Amazônia brasileira. Uma saudação de luta e resistência a todos os presentes. Primeiro agradecer a Alice, a Matilde pelo convite e pela amizade com o MST da Amazônia. O Brasil é um país muito grande e cada bioma, cada região tem suas especificidades. E nós olhamos a luta de classes desde aqui, da Amazônia, e que bom que a nossa contribuição também é importante para todos e todas que lutam no mundo, né? Então, uma saudação de lutas para todos. O Movimento Sem Terra, o MST, ele é um movimento de camponeses, campesinos e campesinas, mas que se articula também com a classe trabalhadora da cidade na construção da reforma agrária popular, né? O MST ele é fruto de uma contradição da formação do Brasil. O Brasil foi construído a partir de grandes latifúndios desde a sua colonização há 525 anos atrás, e a sua estrutura fundiária permaneceu intocada porque ela foi útil para o desenvolvimento do capitalismo global na produção de commodities, assim como a América Latina e a África e a Ásia também serviram de plataforma de desenvolvimento do capital. E é nessa realidade agrária, né, de grandes concentrações e de vários momentos em que os povos do Brasil foram expulsos de suas terras, ou seja, um movimento também de desplaçamento em massa, é que o MST, o Movimento Sem Terra, surge. Nós organizamos famílias que estão na cidade, nas periferias, que têm o desejo de voltar para a terra, né? Então, nós não somos comunidades estabelecidas, nós encontramos uma realidade de concentração fundiária e nós organizamos trabalhadores que estão na cidade, que queiram retornar para o campo, que tenham a sua ancestralidade no campo, que tenham a sua cultura voltada para o campo, e que essa realidade de desplaçamento, essa realidade de expulsão, lhe colocou nessa condição da cidade. Então, nós olhamos para um cenário que não começa hoje, né? Começa com um processo histórico de profunda violência contra o povo, né? Então, esse momento que a gente encontra um povo violentado e que se organiza para fundar, aí sim, o sentido maior da nossa luta é a gente fundar comunidades de resistência em todo o Brasil. Então, nós organizamos o povo temporariamente na cidade e nós questionamos a propriedade da terra no Brasil a partir da legislação constitucional do nosso país, Aqui a terra tem que cumprir uma função social. A função social da terra ela é também sobre trabalho, é sobre equilíbrio ecológico, é sobre uma convivência, um bem-estar para a sociedade, mas o agronegócio, que faz uso da maior parte das terras do Brasil, usa de trabalho escravo, usa de agrotóxico, usa de violência para produzir a agricultura do modelo capitalista. Então, o MST vem, nesse sentido, ocupar as terras do agronegócio, né? Então, a gente organiza as famílias e ocupa e funda comunidades de resistência, né? Então, onde antes haviam homens e mulheres desprovidos de terra, passam a ser lutadores e lutadoras, construtores e construtoras da reforma agrária no Brasil, dado que a reforma agrária não foi feita pelo Estado brasileiro. Então, a gente costuma dizer que um sem terra, né, como a gente se denomina, começa a sua vida no ato de ocupar a terra e fundar uma comunidade de resistência. Eu sou filho de uma comunidade de resistência chamado Palmares 2, que é em homenagem a um quilombo, um grande líder quilombola do Brasil colonial, que foi o Zumbi dos Palmares. A Palmares 2 tem 30 anos de resistência. A Palmares 2 está localizado numa região que é saqueada pela mineração e pela pecuária extensiva, pela criação de gado. E aqui, desde a Palmares, nós protagonizamos também vários momentos de luta. Então, o cenário que a gente vê, Alice, é esse cenário de conflito, né, de luta, de guerra. Há uma guerra velada contra os pobres no mundo, contra os trabalhadores no mundo, e a gente vê isso quando a gente, mulheres sendo violentadas e assassinadas no nosso país, a comunidade LGBT também é profundamente massacrada, há uma guerra no Brasil contra os negros e negras, então não é possível dizer que estamos em paz com todo esse nível de violência contra esses setores. Então é um cenário de guerra em que a crise climática agrava ainda mais, né? Falamos desde a Amazônia, essa floresta tropical tão importante para o equilíbrio climático, mas que também tem sido, o seu lugar tem sido usurpado, né? E tem imprimido aqui na Amazônia uma lógica da produção de commodity. Então, a floresta tem dado lugar para grandes lavouras de soja, de cana-de-açúcar, de eucalipto para produção de papel. Então, essa realidade que a gente se prepara, né? A esquerda no Brasil tenta construir um cenário de estabilidade, em que a democracia se desenvolveria nesse cenário de estabilidade, alcançaria uma maturidade em que o revezamento de poderes representaria uma democracia saudável. Mas nós não conseguimos enxergar esse cenário, né, a partir do movimento Sem Terra, porque as classes dominantes do Brasil, que estão alinhadas com as classes dominantes imperialistas do mundo, não darão paz para os trabalhadores, nem darão aos trabalhadores a prosperidade e a dignidade que o seu trabalho merece. Então, né, ainda que a gente lute dentro de um cenário de Estado democrático de direito, o que a gente vê é um avanço do programa de extrema-direita no Brasil, né, que já esteve na presidência e corre sérios riscos de voltar ao Executivo Nacional. E, pior que isso, domina hoje o parlamentarismo brasileiro. Então, ainda que a gente tenha o Lula e o PT, o Partido dos Trabalhadores, como referências progressistas da condução de um Estado voltado para os pobres, voltado para o povo, nós também temos essa contradição de ter um sistema político que, primeiro, o povo brasileiro não reconhece mais como a sua representação, porque se nós temos uma população com a maior parte de mulheres, 51% da população do Brasil são mulheres, e nós temos um Congresso que nem 30% da representação é de mulher, se nós temos pelo menos 80% da população parda ou negra, e nem 20% do nosso parlamento se declara pardo ou negro, se a gente tem uma população que é majoritariamente pobre, né, majoritariamente da classe trabalhadora, e o que a gente vê é os cargos, né, do Congresso sendo ocupado por empresários, latifundiários, porque contém muito dinheiro, né, muito, e a gente tem aqui uma poesia que a gente usa muito, porque a gente precisa usar as 3 estratégias apresentadas pela Alice na construção de uma comunidade de resistência. Primeiro, porque a nossa ação ela não é reconhecida como legal pelo Estado brasileiro. Então, a gente está cometendo uma infração do ponto de vista das leis do Brasil. Mas a luta histórica dos camponeses e essa trajetória de violência torna legítima a ação das famílias. Então, nós combinamos tanto a ação autônoma de famílias organizadas, né, na construção. Então, toda a comunidade tem autonomia de fazer as suas lutas e lutar pela edificação de suas comunidades em várias dimensões, na saúde, na educação, no combate às violências, no cuidado da infância, no cuidado dos idosos, né? Assim como a gente também tem um comando de unidade nacional. Foi a unidade nacional que permitiu que o MST pudesse chegar a 41 anos de idade e projetar para a luta para mais 40 anos, né? Então, tanto a gente acredita no potencial das massas indignadas, como nós também temos uma organização a nível nacional que ajuda, né, que constrói uma unidade entre os que lutam no Brasil. E nós temos uma grande batalha, que é a Batalha das Ideias. E uma das tarefas que a gente coloca no MST é a Batalha das Ideias no Brasil, em que nós temos grandes limites, como, por exemplo, o índice de analfabetismo, é uma realidade que a gente precisa enfrentar no Brasil para fazer a Batalha das Ideias, mas também combater as ideologias do agro, a ideologia dos coach, a ideologia, né, de supermercado que vem enlatada do Império Americano para cá, para o Brasil. Então, nós temos 3 tarefas, como a gente diz no MST, já concluindo. A primeira tarefa é massificar a luta pela terra. A luta pela terra é a mãe da nossa luta, né? Então, nós somos camponeses desterritorializados que se organizam para retomar o seu lugar na história, que é com a terra sendo a nossa provedora da vida e do trabalho. A nossa segunda tarefa é massificar a agroecologia, porque a gente não acredita, assim como a gente quer retomar a terra, a gente quer fazer as pazes com a natureza. A gente quer reconduzir um processo de produção agrícola baseada na natureza, baseada no trabalho digno. Então, massificar a agroecologia. E o terceiro é a batalha das ideias. É a construção de um Estado popular também, a partir da construção de uma ideologia, de um pensamento de luta, de um pensamento de resistência. Acho que são um pouco dos elementos, dialogando aí com todos.
Obrigada, Paulo. Thank you so much. It was great hearing, such a different perspective from what I'm heard to, just accustomed to hearing. It was very refreshing. So I had a plan for how to run this webinar, and I was going to ask all the speakers a second question now. But for those that have read Aline, we live in a VUCA reality, so I'm going to change the plan. And I'm going to open to see now if the people that are here have questions that they want to do to any of the speakers. And I'll also invite the other people that are here to turn on their cameras. It's such a shiny day, at least here in Lisbon. So yeah, and it's great to see faces. So yeah, I will just see if there's, okay. I will just see if everyone wants to say anything. I will also say that Luis is going to have to leave in around 20 minutes because he has a train to catch. So if you have questions for Luis, also do questions. So yeah, just opening.
Hi, hello. For some reason my camera won't turn on, so it's not that I don't want to. So I'm just struggling with it. So my apologies for that. Yeah. So perhaps I'll let someone else ask a question, and I'll come back. So give me a moment.
All right. But if it doesn't work, you can also ask the question anyways. But if anyone wants to go, feel free to. Louis, you can do your question for Nelly.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think in a way it's two questions. One of the many things that resonated with me in what you said was that in the way that you view the world, in your movement, in your organization, climate change is a factor that's like driving the temperature up on a thing that predates it. And I was wondering if you had thought about that, because it very much resonates with the experience of flooding, where climate change is one of the many things going on. It's a factor in reality that's making everything worse in a situation that exists independently of it. And the other question I had is if you've had any contact with the French social movement, Soulèvement de la Terre, because there's just such strong parallels, which I find really interesting in the kind of thinking environmentalism and system change from the standpoint of land, right? So I did a lot of work with Indigenous land defense in Canada before, and I'm wondering if there's any cross-pollination, because I think it's a really, really good, inspiring thing. And in a way, it's like, I think these are the truly radical people's radical social movements, I find, because they really have the most cogent critique in a way of capitalism, where it's coming back to, land and the conditions for existence at the core of the worldview.
Olá, pensando aqui, né, com o Luiz, obrigado pelas perguntas. Primeiro sobre a crise climática, o MST olha a crise climática como uma face da crise sistêmica do capitalismo, não é fruto da natureza, né, é fruto do desenvolvimento capitalista, e é uma situação que nós criamos, né? A forma como nós organizamos a nossa comida, a forma como nós organizamos as coisas que a gente consome, levou a humanidade também a isso, né? Então a gente vê essa luta, né, com três níveis. O primeiro é o nível imediato, né, em três tempos, né? O primeiro é o imediato. A gente precisa salvar comunidades que estão enfrentando estão enfrentando desmoronamento de guerra. Essas comunidades podem, como você mesmo disse, né, a melhor crítica anticapitalista, mas elas são sujeitas de uma tendência global, né, que é o desmoronamento do capital na cabeça das pessoas, na sociedade, né? Então, esse tempo do imediato é muito necessário aqui. O segundo tempo nosso é o tempo da construção, né? Nós estamos, ao mesmo tempo em que nós estamos salvando as pessoas dos efeitos extremos das enchentes, como aqui no Brasil teve uma situação bem crítica de enchente, acho que vocês não sei se acompanharam, e a gente teve uma experiência de arroz agroecológico que o MST produz, que foi completamente destruída, foram quase 16 mil toneladas de arroz perdido nas enchentes, e foi muito doloroso para todas as nossas famílias que estavam com um processo de construção, virada histórica na produção de arroz aqui no Brasil. No entanto, né, quando a gente constrói com bases sólidas, com bases na nesse movimento de mudanças, a gente tem também, como a gente pode dizer, a gente tem mais sorte, né, no enfrentamento, porque a gente consegue reverter nas comunidades de resistência os efeitos das enchentes, das secas, com mais velocidade e empenho coletivo do que em comunidades não organizadas. Então, ao mesmo tempo que a gente está imediatamente salvando as pessoas, a gente também está edificando infraestruturas sociais que façam efeitos em médio e longo prazo no combate, né? E o terceiro tempo é o tempo mais longo, é o tempo da consciência, né? Então, nós também, ao mesmo tempo em que nós estamos salvando as pessoas e construindo estruturas sociais comunitárias fortes, também estamos fazendo o trabalho de conscientização de que o nosso papel, né, não é lutar só para nós mesmos ou para nossas famílias, mas pela próxima geração, pelo futuro da humanidade no planeta. Então, isso é uma dança de consciência mais profunda, e isso demora mais tempo até as pessoas saberem que produzir de forma agroecológica não é benéfico só do ponto de vista da minha remuneração enquanto camponês, trabalhador, mas é, sobretudo, uma mudança no paradigma da vida. Então, acho que a gente tem esses três tempos na hora em que a gente lida com essas situações, Luiz, que são os efeitos extremos. Aqui na Amazônia, a gente tem muitos problemas com as queimadas, né? Então, a monocultura e a pastagem criam um lastro muito terrível de queimadas. E a mesma coisa a gente pode dizer que acontece aqui. Comunidades de resistência, com aparelhos comunitários mais sólidos, conseguem superar de forma mais rápida e conseguem curas coletivas mais efetivas do que comunidades que não se afirmam em comunidades de resistência, né, e que são muito mais dependem muito mais do Estado para se recompor e sobre a nossa vínculo com a França, né? A gente tem um comitê de amigos da MST na França, que é muito antigo, inclusive, de 1998 ou 1999. Eu não sei ler inglês, Luiz, mas eles vão traduzir aqui. E isso, comunidades que se fortalecem com aparelhos comunitários e um processo, né, tem mais condições de responder. E a gente tem um princípio no MST que é do internacionalismo, né? A Matilde também pode conversar com o meu pai. O meu pai é do setor de internacionalismo do MST. Nós acreditamos que só é possível a libertação de fato e de fato de forma internacional, né? Então, nós temos um compromisso com o internacionalismo e nós construímos a Via Campesina, né, enquanto instrumento internacional, e onde tem Via Campesina, lá também está o MST, e tem Via Campesina na França também, na Europa. Agora estamos lutando muito contra o livre mercado entre a Europa e o Mercosul, né, porque vai ser um acordo de mercado muito danoso, tanto para os brasileiros como para os camponeses da Europa. Falo muito, latinos falam muito.
Thank you so much. So actually, Sara was already able to turn on her camera. So I wanted to give the word to Sarah, and after, I hope I still have some time to ask a final question to Louis before he takes on his train. But go ahead, Sara, first.
I don't know if it's a question so much as a observation. So I'm here tonight because I've been reading your book All In, and I'm also I've worked quite closely with Bertie as part of Just Stop Oil. So yeah, and I think I did find your book, yeah, very, very useful actually, and I'm quite embarrassed on one level that you know, sort of 5 years into acts of civil resistance, the theory of it, it's taken that long for me to go and hunt out the theory and the strategies of what we're doing, but. I suppose overall, my question to you and to the group here is about like that keeping going, like and you talk about in the book, it talks about if you understand what you are doing and what we face, it becomes a moral imperative, and therefore it's easier for people to avoid burnout. And I suppose my question is, I just wonder if that's true. Like listening to what's happening in Brazil, understanding a little bit about what happens to flooded communities because we were affected so much in 2007. Yeah, I mean, I hope it's true, but I just wonder how we keep the community going, given that we are facing an unacknowledged war waged by the capitalist system.
Yeah, so I think that this could be a good moment to do a reveal, which is there is a hidden character between us. So Sinan, who is doing interpretation from Portuguese to English, is Sinan Eden, co-author of All In, a revolutionary theory to stop climate collapse. I'm just wanted to see if you want to say something about this, Sinan. It's fine if you don't, but just checking. Thank you, Sinan. And thanks for your reaction and thanks for your questions, Sarah. Bye, Jay. Thank you. So I wanted to, I know that Louise is going to be leaving in like 5 minutes, right? So I will give you the word to say anything that you want, but I also have a question for you. So if you want to reflect on that, so you can choose. So I had my initial question, which I will ask the other speakers. That is, what are some scenarios that no one is in the movement is preparing for, and what should we be doing to prepare for those scenarios? But then I have another question. So you can choose the one that you want to answer. I'm not expecting you to answer both. But when you were speaking and you were speaking about Valencia, and I think that this is a very interesting scenario to be looking at, because sure, floods have happened before climate change and climate crisis was a thing, but we know that because of climate crisis, they are getting much more intense and much more frequent. And I think that Valencia was something that was not being expected by the common people, maybe for the people that are studying floods and climate change, yes, but by the general public. And it's also a reminder that, yeah, like biblical events, once in a lifetime events will start to happen way more times. And the reaction that people had was not aimed and was not talking about the systemical issue of capitalism and climate change. And I was wondering if in any part of your work there's this kind of attempt to radicalize the public, not only to say, yeah, this was a bad management by the regime, but actually like this is climate collapse happening in front of our eyes. And yeah, how can we be better prepared for a next Valencia, next Rio Grande do Sul?
I'll take the second question and specifically the first part, because the how can we be better prepared is another like massive question, right? So yeah, the whole point of our work is to try to connect the dots and to try to create the conditions whereby people, we met Sinan and yourself through ULEX networks, so we're very taken with pop-ed informed approaches to organizing. Sorry. So because of the networks through which we met you and Sinan, we're of a generation of activists who have read the American manuals and almost exhausted the generalities that they offer us and now have to deal with the world. And so we're very interested in that. We're very interested in working with people. Ultimately, we have a belief that it's for the people we're working with to build their own ideology and world. We can only help. So there's a lot of Ferrerian approaches, and there's a lot of thought to the hoops and the journey that it takes from iFlood to its capitalism. I believe it's possible, but you also need to appreciate where a lot of people are at. And so if you take the Valencia case, the hard fact is that if they had had proper flood warnings in place, the body count would have been much lower. And so that's part of the problem, which is that all of these things are happening at once. It's bad flood warnings will give you a 200-person body count, and incompetence, far-right corruption, all of these things. And climate change will give you the event. And in general, in disaster studies, when we're interested in these things, it's in the interplay of human systems, failure of preparedness, and exploding environmental conditions. So there's no silver bullet to it. I think there was originally a kind of ambition that these things would happen and then everyone would be like, God damn it, Greenpeace was right. And then we're like, yeah, we were right. But it doesn't matter if you're right. It doesn't matter if Just Stop Oil is right. There was an event like that in England after Valencia where a commentator said, do we owe Just Stop Oil an apology? I couldn't give a fuck if you owe Just Stop Oil an apology, nor could anyone whose homes was flooded. It's just not even going to land. Sorry, I'm also talking fast because I need to go like now. So the answer is yes, that work does need to happen. We have a lot of knowledge in the tradition for how we work together to build that knowledge rather than the sorry, Simon. So to conclude, yes, the work we're trying to do is to work with these communities to build together a political viewpoint that merges their experience, that starts from their experience, and builds their own socioeconomic analysis of why they're hit like that. But when we're in a progressive movement, sometimes it's hard to appreciate just how far away our world is from some of the people we need to encounter. And that's the challenge of patience when everything's on fire. So I really need to go because I cannot miss that train, otherwise I'm fucked. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed the book. I really enjoyed talking to both of you. Thanks for having me. So I hope to see you again.
Thank you so much. Have a nice travel. All right. So Louis didn't answer my... Okay, I will give 5 seconds for the interpreters to breathe. Okay, nice. So Louis didn't answer my first question, but maybe Bertie or Pablo will. I will repeat what the question was, which was where, to what kind of scenarios is no one in the movement looking and preparing for, and we should be, and maybe how could we be preparing for those scenarios? Whoever wants to go, you can decide. Maybe Bertie, because yeah, UK to UK.
Sure thing. Yeah, Louis was correct and quite insightful when he said you're basically an idiot if you expect the right disaster to radicalize people, and like idiot speaking. There is lots of people in the UK who are doing organizing work in anticipation of disasters, but it is very easy to think it's just going to happen. And the people in the UK who have been preparing and executing a strategy based on outrageous moments, the best are the far right. Yeah, there's a very tragic case in the UK last year where, was it last year? Anyway, recently, where 2 young girls were murdered in near Liverpool. Yeah, they were killed in like a senseless murder. But in the wake of the killing, the far right were able to mobilize, and this led to riots across the UK. It was a absolutely horrifying time. People were setting up roadblocks on the streets, checking the ethnicity of drivers, and pulling non-white people out of their cars. They're burning libraries to the ground. It was horrible. It was awful on so many ways. I'm sure I don't have to explain that, but it's not because the UK is full of racist people. It's because a racist minority had very intelligently capitalized on an outrageous moment, the murder of 2 young girls. And they'd managed to mobilize people who are disaffected by shit economic conditions, people affected by poverty, by lack of opportunity in their areas that's been built up over the last 50 years in the UK. These conditions meant that the far right were able to mobilize on a massive and violent scale. And we are not nearly as organized as that. We're not nearly as effective as they are in that sort of situation. So I think a better response to outrageous events is badly needed. And maybe I'll just add, you know, the far right, they have an answer. They've got ideas, and those ideas are outrageous and wrong. They're basically blame migrants, blame foreign people, blame non-white people. But a lot of the left, they're not bringing about good ideas and they're not communicating them effectively. Just Stop Oil has always been very forthright in talking about the rich and the elites being responsible. But like Louis said earlier, who gives a fuck if Just Stop Oil are right? You know, we're a small, basically a vanguard group, and we can take pot shots at the rich and the elite. But to do it in such a way that actually communicates to the wide population needs a lot more work. And maybe finally, I'll wrap up by saying we have been engaging in different ways. I mean, I'm part of a group called Assemble, which is a group that's basically funding and supporting people in local communities all across the UK to meet up and have democratic meetings called assemblies. Just simply answer the question, what needs to change about this country? We're not telling people what they should be worried about. We're not telling them what they should do. We're simply funding them to set the agenda themselves. And as they create that agenda, we bring it up to a national level. We help them to take action if they wish to, and we phrase it as a direct threat to the government. And this is a remedy to the sort of polarization which the far right are trying to do. They want to divide us to make us scared and fearful of our neighbor. And the most direct antidote to that is to meet with our neighbors and find out what we have in common.
Thank you, Bertie. Was a very clear answer. Was not expecting that. Thank you. And what about you, Pablo? What do you think is no one looking at in the movement, maybe in Brazil, but it can also be at a global context, whatever you prefer to answer to?
Eu concordo muito com o Bart nesse sentido, que a gente não está se preparando para a ofensiva dos nossos inimigos. Acho que a gente está com essa sensação. Aí, ó. Oi, estão ouvindo? Ah, vocês sumiram aqui da tela por um tempo. Eu vejo que nós estamos se preparando pouco para o que os nossos inimigos estão preparando. É como se nós estivéssemos jogando sozinhos esse jogo. E não é. Eu vejo desde a América Latina que nós temos lutado muito para manter governos progressistas, mas não temos nos preparados para possíveis regimes autoritários que venham desse momento de declínio do Império Norte-Americano. Os recursos naturais que a gente tem e são cobiçados pelo Império e podem mudar a geopolítica internacional, e nós estamos sem conseguir mensurar qual é a força e qual é o tipo de estratégia que os nossos inimigos podem produzir contra nós. Então, acho que todo o esforço é válido de construir um cenário de estabilidade, porque as pessoas também merecem paz e também querem um pouco de trégua para poderem criar seus filhos, e trégua da violência, trégua dessa violência colonial. Mas isso também não pode nos impedir de enxergar os cenários que os nossos inimigos estão produzindo, de mais segregação, de mais individualismo, de mais terror entre a sociedade. Então, acho que esse é um cenário a qual a gente não está se preparando. Nós não estamos nos preparando para uma ofensiva como essa que o Bart colocou, de forças à direita, capitalizando a ira popular. E não significa que as pessoas, todo mundo virou de direita, todo mundo virou fascista, mas nós não esperávamos que a direita conseguisse aprender a capturar os ânimos do povo, né? E o que a gente tem visto são movimentos à direita que não são pequenos, são muito grandes e com participação de setores populares, pais, mães, profissionais liberais, universitários que se engajam em movimentos de direita, porque eles têm o discurso antissistêmico e nós não, porque a esquerda está lutando por um regime estável e democrático, e o regime estável e democrático tem levado as pessoas também à tragédia social. Então, eu vejo que esse cenário a gente não está preparado. A gente tem se preparado para lutar com o que temos aqui, mas não temos dimensão ainda do que vai ser, do que a direita, a extrema-direita e as forças, em especial agora, com a ascensão de bilionários com fome de poder político, pode produzir nas economias, em especial nas economias mais do sul global. Isso.
Obrigada. Thank you. A lot of interesting food for thought. I wanted to check if anyone in the public wants to answer, because I'm imagining that if you are here, you are probably an activist. Maybe I'm wrong. But I guess that you have your own answers. So I wanted to see if anyone wants to answer to this question that I did. Or it can also be if you have questions for the speakers or for in general, you can also do it. So just, yeah, this is the last moment of opening the words to anyone who wants to say. So if you have anything to say, it's now.
Bom, nós vamos também falar agora?
You can also talk now if you want. I was asking for people that to the other people that are here at the session if they want to answer to the question, but also yeah, we are about to wrap up, so if there are other things you want to say that you didn't have the opportunity to say, you can also use this moment now before we close.
Eu só quero agradecer. Eu falei muito também.
All right, if no one wants to add anything else, I wanted to let you know. Oh, Onur, are you still there? Can you put on the last slides, please? Because I don't remember the information there, and it has information I want to share. But yeah, so I wanted to tell you that if you have seen the webinar so far, so we did the first webinar about globalization, the second webinar about class, the third webinar about rupture, and now this webinar about grand strategies. And you might have realized that something real is missing. So after we agree on the model of transformation, which is rupture, and we find our grand strategy, we will have just an agreement about ideas, but we also need to understand how to build power, actually. Because yeah, also to bet on a scenario, we need to develop certain capabilities in order to be able to be prepared for that scenario. And this is what we'll be talking about on the next webinar. We'll be talking about movement capabilities and on which capabilities you should invest when you are pursuing certain strategies. And Mathilde, since you are not interpreting right now, do you want to remind us the date of the webinar? Because I had that on my slide, but yes, that's failing. Mathilde, you are on the Portuguese channel though. Do you remember, right? You need to go to the English channel and then Noah will translate to the Portuguese channel. Yes. Thank you, Mathilde. And thank you everyone for being here. Thank you a lot to Bertie, Pablo, and Louis, who is no longer here. I really enjoyed listening to you, and I hope that the other people also did. But at least, you know, one person did. And thank you so much to the amazing interpreters and tech support people, and to everyone that was here. And see you on the next webinar.
Thank you so much, guys.
Graças a todos. Tchau. Muito obrigado.
Ciao. Beijinhos. Shize, can you listen to me? Are you going to send the recording to